Hello and welcome to today's video, which is about dependent versus independent clauses. Dependent clauses are often called subordinate clauses. So what does subordinate mean? It means less important. For example, in the army, a normal soldier is less important than a general. He is a subordinate to the general. His rank is lower. The meaning of dependent is a little bit different. It means that one thing, the weaker thing, relies on the other thing, the stronger one, to look after it. So a baby is dependent on its parents to look after it. A cat is dependent on its owner to give it food. With both words, the main idea is that there is one strong or important person, in our examples, the general or the parent, and one less important or weaker person, the baby or the cat. What is the difference between independent and dependent clauses? An independent clause could be a sentence on its own. A dependent clause couldn't. This is the big test. Just ask the question, can this be a sentence on its own? If the answer is yes, it's the stronger one, or the independent clause. If the answer is no, it's the weaker one, or the dependent or subordinate clause. So try it. Try these examples. So we're going to try and identify each of the clauses and which one is the independent clause. So here's the example. You might recognize the words. But when you smile at the ground, it ain't hard to tell. You don't know, oh, you don't know you're beautiful. So what we're looking for is the clause there that could be a sentence by itself. That will be the independent clause. And also the clause that could not be a sentence by itself. That will be the dependent one. And so when you smile at the ground, could that be a sentence on its own? And the answer is no, so that is the dependent one. It ain't hard to tell. You don't know, oh, you don't know you're beautiful. Yes, that could be a sentence on its own, so that is the independent one. And in all these ones, there is a color coding, and red means it's the dependent clause, and purple means it's the independent one. When I get home, I'm going to eat my dinner. So same idea, look for the one that can stand on its own and be a separate sentence by itself, and the one that can't. The one that can't will be the dependent one. The one that can will be the independent one. And the answer, when I get home, will not stand by itself as a separate sentence. So that is the dependent one. I'm going to eat my dinner. Yes, you could be a sentence like that on its own. So that is the independent one. Let's move on to the next one. I can beat my brother in a running race even if he starts before me. And the answer is I can beat my brother in a running race. That could be a sentence on its own, so that is the independent clause. Even if he starts before me, that could not be a sentence on its own, so that is the dependent one. Moving on to the next one. I have never tried to copy in an exam, but I may have heard other students saying the answer. So, which one would be a sentence, could be a sentence on its own? And the answer, I have never tried to copy in an exam, could be a sentence on its own. But I may have heard other students saying the answer, that could not be a sentence on its own. So that second one, the red one, is the dependent one. The purple one is the independent one. Although I like my boyfriend, I've decided I'm never going to get married. And the answer, although I like my boyfriend, could not be a sentence on its own, so that is the dependent part. And I've decided I'm never going to get married. That could be a sentence on its own, and so that is the independent part. However much you bully me, I will never tell you the answers to our homework. So the answer to that one, however much you bully me, could not be a sentence on its own. So that is the dependent part. And I will never tell you the answers to our homework. That could be a separate sentence by itself. So that is the independent part. I'm going to Mesa on Saturday. And the answer, I'm going to Mesa. That could be a sentence just by itself. On Saturday, could not. So on Saturday is the dependent part. And I'm going to Mesa is the independent part. After dinner, I'm going to do my homework. And the answer, after dinner, could not stand on its own. So that is the dependent part. I'm going to do my homework could be a sentence on its own. So that is the independent part. On the line car, I met someone who was also going to Umpium. And the answer, on the line car, could not be a sentence on its own, so that is the dependent one. I met someone who was also going to Umpium. That could be a sentence on its own, so that is the independent clause. I'm never going back to my ex, however much he asks me to. And the answer, I'm never going back to my ex. That could be a sentence on its own, so that is the independent clause. However much he asks me to, that could not stand on its own, so that is the dependent one. On the way to Chiang Mai, I met the girl I'm going to marry. And the answer for that one, on the way to Chiang Mai, there's no way that could be a sentence on its own, so that is the dependent one. I met the girl I'm going to marry. Yes, that could. So that is the independent one. I love my new motorbike that my uncle gave me when I graduated. And the answer for that one, I love my new motorbike, could be a sentence on its own. So that is the purple one, the independent clause. That my uncle gave me when I graduated, that could never be a sentence on its own, so that is the dependent clause. So in each case, there's one big piece of information, the independent clause, and a second piece that gives us a bit more information about the big one, the dependent or subordinate clause. The second one often tells us things like when or in what situation the independent clause will happen. Connectives are not always about joining an independent and a dependent clause. They can also join two independent clauses. Let's look at three different things. I got up late. My motorbike broke down. I was late for school. We could write them just like that, each one as a separate sentence. I got up late, full stop. My motorbike broke down, full stop. I was late for school, full stop. We are communicating good information, but we could do a lot better. It's boring to write three short sentences in a row like this. It also invites more questions, such as, were you late for school because you got up late or because the motorbike broke down? You might need to do English tests after you leave school. For example, to get a place at a university where the teaching is in English, they might test your English before they accept you to make sure you'll understand the lectures. If you apply for a job where using English is important, like hospitals or hotels with English speaking customers, they might make you sit an English test before they offer you a job. If you use three short sentences, I got up late, full stop, my motorbike broke down, full stop, I was late for school, full stop, you'll get a low score. By joining two of them together, you can make the writing more interesting and get a higher score. Let's say you were late because you got up late and your motorbike broke down later. You can write, I was late for school because I got up late and then my motorbike broke down. By adding two little words, because and then, you have given a lot more information. You have explained that you were late because you got up late and the problem with the motorbike came later. Even if there is no cause and effect, the reason you were late for school was not because you got up late or because your motorbike broke down. There was some other reason. We can still make it more interesting by telling the reader the order that they happened. For example, I had a really bad day today. Firstly, I got up late, then I was late for school, and lastly, my motorbike broke down. Notice what we've done here. We've joined three independent sentences into one sentence. That's an important idea. We choose whether to keep them as three sentences or combine them into one sentence. We could make it two sentences. Firstly, I got up late, then I was late for school, full stop. Lastly, my motorbike broke down, full stop. Let's look at our sentences again. My motorbike broke down. I was late for school. We could say my motorbike broke down, so I was late for school. Or we could say I was late for school because my motorbike broke down. Most people will tell you that these both mean the same, and that is true. But the one that comes first always looks more important. If you're explaining to your teacher why you are late for school, you would say, I was late for school because my motorbike broke down. If you're talking to the teacher, the most important thing is that you were late. If you're at the bike shop to get your bike fixed, the most important thing you want to say is that your motorbike has broken down. You might also tell him that it made you late for school, but he's not really interested in that. So you would say, my motorbike broke down, so I was late for school. In other words, you're in control. You decide which one the focus will be on. And you'll base your decision on who you're talking to and what facts they need to know. Let's say the person you're talking to is not at the school or at the bike shop. You're telling your flatmate about your day. You're making the one that you put first the topic of conversation. If you start with, I was late for school, there are many things that you could have said for the second part of the sentence. You could have said, so I'll have to work late tomorrow. Or, so the students were noisy while they waited for me. Or, so the headmaster is upset with me. The topic is the effect at school. If you say, my motorbike broke down, so I was late for school, you could have said, so I'll have to get it repaired tomorrow. Or, it'll cost me a lot of money to fix it. Or, so I'll have to walk to work tomorrow. The topic is the motorbike. So, summary. It's all about clarity and variety or variation. Clarity helps you say exactly what you want to say so the reader gets the message perfectly. Variety is about making your writing or speaking interesting. Nobody likes it much if you always use the same way to say things. It gets boring and repetitive. It's like food. It might be cooked well and tasty, but if you're given the same food every day, it gets boring. To keep people interested, you need variety. And this is the end, my friend. See you next time.